إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So we're still talking about the times when performing tayammum is allowed. So the next thing that the author says, so last week we talked, on Thursday we talked about illness and what falls under illness. So the next thing that the author says, if the water is cold enough to physically harm the user. This is only allowed on the condition that he can find no one to heat it or is unable to use the public bathrooms. So here when he says the public bathrooms, he's referring to the hammamat, that where you can go and shower and they heat up the water for you. So it's not obviously not talking about using the toilets and that type of thing. So he says, the evidence that he brings is, he quotes the hadith that we talked about last week from Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu, that he said, احتلمت في ليلة باردة في غزوة ذات السلاسل فأشفقت إن اغتسلت أن أهلك. Or that Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu said that he had a wet dream on a cold night during the battle of Dhat al-Salasil, and he was scared that if he performed ghusl that he would die. فَتَيَمَّمْتُ ثُمَّ صَلَّيْتُ بِأَصْحَابِي الصُّبْحِ. Or he said, so I performed tayammum and then I prayed, or I led my companions in the morning prayer. فذكروا ذلك للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا عمر صليت بأصحابك وأنت جنب. Or that they mentioned this to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he said, "O Amr, you prayed or you led your companions in prayer while you were upon janaba." فأخبرته بالذي منعني من الاغتسال وقلت إني سمعت الله يقول ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم إن الله كان بكم رحيما. Or he said, so I told him, or I informed him, the thing that prevented me from performing ghusl. So meaning that it was too cold. And I said, I heard Allah say, and do not kill yourselves, indeed Allah is all merciful to you. فضحك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ولم يقل شيئا. Or he said that, so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam laughed and he didn't say anything. So the point of this, it's an obvious, the way that it's being used is that this water was too cold. He thought he might die. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't say anything, or he accepted that usage of Amr, and he didn't say you shouldn't have or redo it or anything like that. And this hadith, as we talked about last time, is narrated by Ahmad, Abu Dawood, Al-Hakim, Ad-Daraqutni, Ibn Hibban, and Al-Bukhari in mu'allaq form. But as we said before, it's a weak hadith, so it's not usable for this topic. This is all the author mentioned, and there's no other specific text about the cold being a reason for tayammum. So this leaves us with the question, is it allowed? And if it is allowed, what's the evidence? Because we talked about before, the verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned tayammum being permissible when there's no water. And then we talked about times that would include that. So even if there is water, if it's not enough, or if it's najas or something like this. Likewise, we talked about the illness. So where does this fall? What would be the evidence for this? So myself, I couldn't understand what the evidence would be. So, and also I didn't want to accept, some sort of like a weak argument as saying, well, it's kind of hard, so you can't, or so you can, or anything like this. So I spoke with one of the ulama who's a Zahiri, so meaning they don't take qiyas and they don't take anything of these analogies and that type of thing. So he explained that this would fall under an illness, and the reason for that is because you're not able to use the water because of the weakness of yourself, so whether it's valid or not, because of you're not able to handle the coldness of the water. So it would fall very, very similar, if not exactly, under the reason of being ill. So this would be the evidence, is that it would still fall under the verse that a person isn't able to due to something with their body. So just like if we would say that, if they used water, they would, get an infection, or it would cause them too much pain or something like this because of something that was on their body. Likewise, being too cold to the point where you thought you were going to die, or it was going to cause you pain or something like this, would obviously, it would have the same logic behind it. So this is really all that there is to say about the water being too cold. The next thing the author says is, when water is nearby, but one does not want to fetch it due to fear. So then he says, if one fears for his life, family, wealth, so meaning he says, for example, an enemy is nearby, or whether that's an animal or a human, or one is a prisoner, and so on, one may perform tayammum. This is also allowed if there is water, but one lacks the proper means to get it. Or if one fears some accusation against him if he gets it. So, again, the author didn't mention any evidence for this. So what would be the evidence? And it's in something we've talked about before. So water's nearby, but you can't get it due to fear. What would be the evidence that that's allowed to perform tayammum at this point? So think about all the evidences that we've talked about before that are confirmed. Where would this fall in it?
Wouldn't it be the same thing if you don't have any water? Because obviously you're not going to put yourself in harm, which means that you're actually unable to get the water. So if you just wait, the salah time will go on you. So then that would make it valid to do tayammum, because to get the water you can get harmed. So
right. So the evidence is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Falam tajidu ma'a," or that you don't find any water, because just like let's say the water got shut off here, is there no water in the world? Of course. I mean, there may be a block away. I don't have water here, so I can't find water, so I can perform tayammum. So likewise, if the water was over there, but there was some kind of, there was a wolf in here, and you're going to die by getting it. With the fact that the water's there, it might as well be on the other side of the world. I can't get it without dying or without some major harm coming to me, so you don't have water. So exactly. That's the evidence, is that same part of the verse. So that's all we really need to say about that. The only other thing would be where he says if someone fears an accusation against him if he gets it. So they give a number of examples of this. What's something that would fall under this? So someone can't perform it because an accusation might come towards him.
What do you mean? So what was the question?
So there's water, but you can't get the water without making yourself that someone can make an accusation towards you. Or by using that water, an accusation might fall towards you.
Would it be the same thing, or that's not heavy enough to hold the same?
No, I mean, what would be an example of that? What does he mean when he says that?
Like if you have to go in a place which has women in there,
okay,
you're by yourself or something, or like a woman who's not dressed or something like that.
Right. Right. No, I mean, if they thought, if you felt that maybe if I got the water, someone might think I stole it, then that might come under it. The classic example that they give is you're at someone's house, and you wake up in the morning and now you have to perform ghusl. The example that they give, or most books of fiqh that they'll mention, is they'll say that if the person fears an accusation that they might say that they performed zina with someone in that house and now they have to perform ghusl, then they would perform tayammum at that point to protect their honor. That's the class. That's what he's referring to when he says that. Stuff like that. Next he says, if one is saving his water for later use. So he says this could be for a hound, so meaning a dog, or another kind of animal, for dough, cooking, or to remove an impurity that is not pardonable. So what does that mean when he says that? To remove an impurity that's not pardonable.
Like feces or urine or something?
Right, so something that's, because like we talked about before, some of the ulama, or many of them, divide things into something that's pardonable or excusable and something that isn't. So meaning like, for example, you were walking and you got something on your shoe, that would be pardonable, they say, if you just rubbed it on the ground. So even if something's left at that point, it's pardonable because of whatever reason. And then same, when you go to the washroom, if you only use rock or paper or something like that, there's going to remain something behind. But that's pardonable because we have evidence from the Sharia to tell us that that's sufficient to use just wiping. And if you didn't use water, you're not required to use water at that point. So meaning that something that didn't fall under those categories, you have to wash it off now. So they say, that's what he's referring to when he says not pardonable. So then he says, Imam Ahmad says, many of the companions performed tayammum to save water for drinking. I haven't found that particular. I found where Imam Ahmad said that, but I haven't found any narrations that he's mentioned. But we'll continue to go into it anyway. Then he mentions a narration from Ali radiallahu anhu. So it's narrated from Zadan, from Ali radiallahu anhu. فالرجل يكون في السفر فتصيبه الجنابة ومعه الماء القليل يخاف أن يعطش قال يتيمم ولا يغتسل. Or Ali radiallahu anhu narrated that, or it's narrated from him, from his companion Zadan, that if a man was traveling and he fell into janaba and he only had enough water, he only had enough water, either for him to drink or to perform ghusl. So he said he should perform tayammum and not perform ghusl. And he says, narrated by Daraqutni. And then he says, or the last thing that he mentions is, Ibn Taymiyyah says, if a person needs to relieve himself, but has only a small amount of water, it is best that he pray with tayammum and relieve himself, rather than keep his ablution and perform and pray before relieving himself. So does that example make sense? So he's saying if a person's on wudu, they have to go to the washroom. If they only have enough water to either wash themselves after going to the washroom or perform wudu, it's better for them to go to the washroom, clean themselves, and then perform tayammum. Because you're not supposed to pray when you're holding, or you're fighting back going to the washroom. So that's the first thing. Second, you're allowed to go to the washroom. There's no problem. There's nothing against in the Sharia going to the washroom. So you going to the washroom, you're not doing anything wrong. And then you're required to clean yourself. And then you would do that. And at this point, you have no more water. So at this point, now you just make tayammum, because at this point you have no water. You're not required to say, I might not have water in the future, or what if I don't have enough? You go about your daily life. If you have to perform tayammum, then this is something in the Sharia that we have permission for. Yeah.
So, but what is he saying, that after it's better to use the bathroom, then clean yourself with water and then make tayammum?
Right. So instead of holding it, and so then you don't have to break your wudu before the salat, and then using the water to clean yourself.
But it's not obligatory to use water after you use the bathroom, right?
No, but you can. So the point in that situation is, his Ibn Taymiyyah's point is that tayammum falls into the Sharia just as wudu would. So we don't have to go and say, well, I don't have enough water for this. Should I save it for this? I might have to make wudu later. No, just you go about your daily life. If you need to drink, you drink. If you need to go to the washroom and wash yourself, you do that. If you need to, whatever you need to do. And if at the time it comes time to perform wudu, you have enough water, you perform wudu. If you don't have water, you perform tayammum.
No, but what I was trying to say is if it wasn't obligatory to wash after you use the bathroom, wouldn't it be better to use the bathroom, not wash, and just make wudu with the water?
Someone could say that, but then the argument could be made that it's sunnah to use water. So I have water when I go to the washroom. I can use it because it's sunnah, and now I don't have any more. So now I don't have water, I'll just perform tayammum, because each one of those things is valid and acceptable, and even washing yourself after sunnah. So, for us to say, well, we're going to leave it because later on I might have to perform tayammum, we don't look at things that way. So this is, just what Ibn Taymiyyah means. So when we talk about this issue of saving the water and performing tayammum instead, so meaning the water is there, but we have to decide, do we use it for this thing, or do we save it for ourselves and perform tayammum, or what do we do? So it's the opinion of the four Imâms, so Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, Ahmad, as well as Imam Sufyân ath-Thawrî, Ishaq ibn Rahwayh, and Ibn al-Munthir himself. He said that there's a consensus that this is what you do. So if you have water and you're worried that you might go thirsty, or you need it for cooking, or you need it to feed an animal that you have, that you'd save the water, you perform tayammum, and you use the water for whatever you need to use it for. The only dispute is with regards to what you're saving it for. So there's some exceptions that the ulama differed on. So they differed on types of humans to save it for and types of animals. So if you look to the books of fiqh, they differ on what if there's someone who's fighting against the Muslimin, and you have enough water to either perform wudu and this person will go thirsty, or you give it to this person so they don't suffer and you perform tayammum. So this is where they differ. The Imam An-Nawawî mentioned that he said there's a consensus that you have to perform wudu. You can't save it for this type of person. Or likewise, if there's an apostate or something like this, that this is so. Imam An-Nawawî said there's a consensus that this is the case, that you'd use the water for yourself regardless of what happens to this person. However, the ulama, there isn't a consensus, because many of the Maliki scholars said that whatever the ruling is on this person, so he's fought the Muslims or whatever, you can't make someone suffer in Islam. We're not allowed to have someone suffer. Unless, like we know the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith of Anas in Bukhari and elsewhere, when the people killed the shepherd or one of the shepherds of the Prophet ﷺ, and they mutilated him, the Prophet ﷺ burnt out their eyes and threw them in the desert for them to suffer. And they were asking for water and they didn't give it. But this was because of what they did to the person. In general, we can't let any human suffer, regardless of even if they're, for example, like if someone murdered someone and the ruling of qisas is put on them, so they're going to be executed. You execute them and you get it over with. You don't let them suffer in this type of thing. So the Mâlikiyyah say that this situation, if they're going to stay alive, because whatever, the hakim isn't going to implement the ruling for a while, or whatever the case is, then you would give them the water and you would perform tayammum. So this is an exception. Likewise, as the author, many ulama say that there's a difference between, what type of animal is it that might be suffering. So if it's an animal that you can own, or if it's an animal that's tahir, that shouldn't be killed or culled or whatever you want to call it, then you have to give them the water and you can't let them suffer. So they say, but what if it's a dog that isn't allowed to own? What if it's a pig? Then what's the ruling on it? So again, Imam An-Nawawî said that there's a consensus that you would use the water and let the animal go without the water. Again, the Malikiyyah say no, because again, if you're able to kill the animal that needs to be killed, then you would kill it and you'd use the water. If you couldn't, then you're going to leave this animal to suffer. So at that point, you would need to give them the water and let them and perform tayammum. And Allahu A'lam, this is the stronger opinion, that nothing can be left to suffer. So if the choice was between using the water and letting something suffer, regardless of what the thing is, you would or your other choice is performing tayammum and giving them the water, the obligation is to give them the water regardless of what type of human it is or what type of animal it is. Then this would be the stronger opinion. So this is just a little bit to add. And some of the evidence that they use, and it's not specific on this topic obviously, but the two hadiths. So there's the one hadith from Abu Hurairah, or they're both from Abu Hurairah, but the one that the Prophet ﷺ said, غُفِرَ لِمْرَأَةٍ مُومِسَةٍ مَرَّتْ بِكَلْبٍ عَلَى رَأْسِ رَكِي يَلْهَثُ قَالَ يَكَادُ يَقْتُلْهُ الْعَطْشِ فَنَزَعَتْ خُفَّهَا فَأَوْثَقَتْهُ بِخِمَارِهَا فَنَزَعَتْ لَهُ مِنَ الْمَاءِ فَغُفِرَ لَهَا بِذَلِكَ. Or that's the hadith from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, where the Prophet ﷺ said a prostitute was forgiven due to she passed by a dog who was at the top of a well, and it was panting because of its thirst, and it almost died because of its thirst. So she took off her khuf and tied it to her khimar and dipped it down into the well and got water for the dog. So she was forgiven due to that. So this shows that even though the dog in Islam, and we said that the rajih is that it's tahir, but you can't own it. We're not allowed to own a dog. We can't have a dog as a pet or anything like this. The only exceptions are, if it's for hunting or for farming, or for, and some make the exception as well to guard dogs and the like, and for herding dogs, and that's from the text, the herding dogs. So, despite the fact that we can't own it, this woman was forgiven because she gave it water when it was going to die. So this gives us, even though it's not about do you perform tayammum or not, the point is that if there's this great of a reward in doing something and we're not supposed to let something suffer, then it has a weight or it has a place in the Sharia. Any questions about that stuff? Yeah.
One thing I don't get is why did An-Nawawî say that there's a jama'ah that should let it suffer?
If we look to the different ulama who talk about ijma', they're at different levels. So some of the ulama say, some of them, and we don't go this far, but they say we don't pay any attention to Imam An-Nawawî's claims of ijma', just because very often he would say that, and then you'd find many people not saying that. So through going through these things, they would say, okay, well, how much, we don't put all this weight in it anymore, because it would mean something, because if he says ijma', obviously it's not going to be the majority say the opposite. But for us to say, well, now this is evidence that there's ijma', usually we don't say that that's the case.
So the cases where Nawawî said there was ijma' and the four major madhahib said something different?
Not that much, but that there is a significant amount for us to say, well, there couldn't be ijma' at any point. Likewise, Imam Ibn Qudama, so some of them say that about him as well. The strongest ones who claim ijma' usually are Ibn Hazm and Ibn al-Munthir. So usually if they say ijma', then there usually is ijma', especially Imam Ibn Hazm, because he only in many instances he only considered ijma' from the Sahaba. So for him to make a claim like that, it's a big deal to him. And yeah, so that's just a little bit kind of a side note about ijma'. Next, the author says, when one can get water, but fears the prayer will be over by the time he gets it. So now we're talking about, and we talked about this a bit before when Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, when he used that hadith of the Prophet ﷺ performing tayammum to return the salam, al-Bukhari used that to say, or as evidence that you can perform tayammum if you fear that the salat will go out or the time will be missed. So the author says he can perform tayammum and pray and does not need to repeat his prayer, and then the translator adds after he gets water. So he's meaning here that a person realizes the time and sees that the time is almost over, knows that if I go to get the water or whatever I need to do to actually perform wudu, I'll miss the time. But if I perform tayammum, then I'll make the time and there won't be any issue. So on this issue, on this topic, there's 2, possibly 3 opinions depending on how you divide it. So the first is that the person, what the author said, performs tayammum and prays in the time, and then he's fine. So even if he finds wudu or finds water right after that, he doesn't have to redo the salat at all. And this is the opinion of the Mâlikiyyah, or the main Maliki opinion. So they say that if a person almost realizes the time is almost done and knows if I perform tayammum I'll make the time, but if I make wudu I won't, he has to perform tayammum. The evidence that they use is they say that praying in the time has a big weight, or it's something that the Sharia takes into account at a very high level. So to just say, well, I don't have water, so I'll wait until later, they say this is not acceptable. And the reason for that is, what's the main, or one of the main reasons that we say that we perform tayammum in general? Or the first main reason?
To take a hardship off you?
But in what situation though? No, but I mean what's the cause for us to be able to do it? When you have no water. When you have no water, if we look at throughout history, out of all the times in history that people didn't have water, was it something from then until they die? Or was it from then until I'll probably have water in a couple hours or tomorrow? Yeah, so it's a short time. So in that situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the permission to perform tayammum, even though I know that I'm going to have water eventually. So He didn't tell us wait until the time goes out and then pray when you get water. No, He said pray with the tayammum, even though eventually we're going to probably have water. I mean, for the vast majority of the times, unless the person dies from not having water. Otherwise, you're going to have water. So in this situation, praying in the time was given precedence over waiting for water. So what's the difference between it now? If you realize the time is going to go out, and I can get to the water, but the time's going to go out, it's very, very similar to the situation of not having water at all, but eventually going to get the water. So it's almost the same. The only difference is someone might say, well, I have the water here, I don't have the time, but it's very similar in the sense that we're putting the praying in the time ahead of performing wudu and missing the time. So this is the first opinion and the first evidence that they use. Also they say that we make qiyas upon the traveler. So the traveler, if he knows that he can go get the water, but it's going to take him too long, for him to find it, there's a consensus that he can perform tayammum. So traveler, there's a consensus he can do this. Person who's a resident, that's where the difference comes in. So they say, well, if he's allowed to do it, then this person should be allowed to do it. And then the last thing they use is that hadith that we talked about from Abu Juhaym, that he said, أقبل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من نحو بئر جمل فلقيه رجل فسلم عليه فلم يرد عليه السلام فلم يرد عليه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم السلام حتى أقبل على الجدار فمسح بوجهه ويديه ثم رد عليه السلام. Or that Abu Juhaym said that the Prophet ﷺ came from the direction of Bi'r Jamal, and he met a man a man met him and greeted him. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't return the salam until he went to a wall and touched. So he used the wall, and then he wiped his face and his hands, and then he returned the salam. So in this situation, what's more obligatory, to perform the salat in the right time or to return the salam to someone? Perform the salat. So, and we know returning the salam is obligatory, but without any doubt, praying the salat in the time is more obligatory than returning the salam. So they say that when the Prophet ﷺ saw that he might not be able to return the salam to this person before he gets water, he performed tayammum so that he could return the salam. So if that's allowed to do for returning the salam, they say that doing that for performing the salat in the right time is more deservable. So this is the first opinion. The second is they say that we differentiate between two separate things. So if the person is at the end of the time out of negligence, then he can do it. So meaning that he can perform the tayammum. If he does so, or if he's at the end of the time because he slept through it, or because he forgot, then he doesn't have to perform tayammum, he has to perform wudu. And this is the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah. So the argument for this, what could be the argument for this? So that if it's out of forgetfulness or sleeping, then you go out of the time, even if you perform wudu, even if it's going to take you out of the time. But if it's out of you were doing something and whatever, and then you delayed it, then you would have to perform tayammum. Right, so the hadith about the person being excused if they sleep, when the Prophet ﷺ said, أَمَا إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ فِي النَّوْمِ تَفْرِيطٌ وَإِنَّمَا التَّفْرِيطُ عَلَى مَنْ لَمْ يُصَلِّ الصَّلَاةَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَ الْوَقْتِ أو حَتَّى يَجِيءَ وَقْتَ الصَّلَاةِ الْأُخْرَى. Or that the Prophet ﷺ said in this hadith from Abu Qatada, indeed there is no negligence in sleeping, but negligence lies in not praying a prayer until the time of the next prayer has come. And that hadith is narrated by Muslims. So they say that you're excused. So whether the time goes out, the thing that led you to that was something that's completely excusable. So there's no need on the person to rush, and that they would just perform tayammum, or they would perform wudu whenever they're able to find the water. The last opinion is that they have to perform wudu even if the time goes out. So you don't perform tayammum whatsoever. And that's the opinion of the majority. So some of the Mâlikiyyah, particularly the ones from al-Maghrib al-Islami, so the northern Africa, the Ahnaf and the Hanabila. So what they say is the hadith that we talked about before from Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ, the part of the hadith that is relevant or that talks about this is that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الصَّعِيدَ الطَّيِّبِ وُضُوءَ الْمُسْلِمِ وَإِنْ لَمْ يَجِدَ الْمَاءَ 10 سِنِينَ, or that pure ground or pure earth is the means of purification for the Muslim, even if he doesn't find water for 10 years. فَإِذَا وَجَدَ الْمَاءَ فَلْيُمَسَّهُ بَشَرَتَهُ فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ هُوَ خَيْرٌ. Or that, so then if he finds water, let him touch it to his skin. So here we see that having the water, it must be done, unless you don't have water. So the fact that this person has water or can get access to water, he has to perform wudu, and tayammum wouldn't be sufficient because he does have the water, it's just that he can't get to it on time. Allahu alam, and this hadith is narrated by Abd al-Razzaq, and it's a hasan hadith. Allahu alam, if we look at all this, what seems to be the strongest opinion? Okay, how come?
Because he accepts that the time you experience the water from tayammum, but if you're excused from your sleeping, it makes perfect sense. I was going to say the first opinion that you can do it, but when you add that part of the sleeping, I forget, it makes sense, right?
What if someone said, well, yes, we're excused, but now, we have enough time to pray, the time isn't gone, and I'm able to perform some type of purification before the time ends and do it all in the time, so that would take precedence.
You're not longer under the heading of the Mr. It's still in the time now. Right?
So you mean it wouldn't be excused, you mean?
No, because let's say I slept through Fajr or something, and I can make wudu, yeah. But if I slept through, but there's 5 minutes left, and if I have Tayammum, if I can make Tayammum and Salli, then doesn't that take the same ruling as...
Actually, that's not right. Because you didn't mix the Salah, the Salah's not about the time, so yeah, that makes sense.
Right, and Allahu Alam, that seems to me the strongest is the first opinion, because if you slept through the whole salat, then there's now that's your time. Because we know in the other hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man nama ala salati aw nasiyaha falyusalliha idha dhakaraha," or that the Prophet ﷺ said, which means whoever sleeps through the salat or forgets it, then let him pray it when he remembers it. So, if you slept through the whole salat, the whole time was gone, then when you get up, then you look at it and say, okay, can I find water? And even in that situation, if someone thought, I might not have water for another 12 hours, we'd say make tayammum, because you should pray it now. For us to say, well, just wait, let's say it was Fajr and he wakes up and then, Dhuhr is not for 7 hours and he doesn't know I'm not going to have water or not. We tell him make tayammum, pray, and then that's your time now. So Allahu Alam, the first opinion of the Mâlikiyyah seems to be the strongest opinion. Yeah.
I was going to say, the opinion that, if you miss the Salah or something, then you just make wudu. But if you miss it out of negligence, you make tayammum. Did the opinion say that you had to make tayammum, or can you still make wudu? Because either way, you miss the Salah, out of negligence, can't you just make wudu now? Does it matter if you make that? Or
you mean the time is actually gone?
Yeah. So
it's out now, and it's out of negligence?
Yeah.
No, then we would look, at that point, if he has water, then he makes wudu. Because there's no reason, he's not going to miss anything. It's already gone.
But why did it say that, but if he does it out of negligence, then he has to make tayammum?
Because they say because now he's not excused, so he has to rush to pray.
Oh, not negligence as in he missed the prayer, negligence as in he delayed it so
Delayed it, so now he has a choice. If I make wudu, I'm going to miss the time completely. If I make tayammum, I'll catch the time, but now I didn't perform wudu, so which is first?
I thought you meant negligence until he missed the salah, now it's just why wouldn't he make wudu?
Exactly, yeah, if he misses the time, you make wudu, because whether it takes you 5 minutes or 10 seconds, the time's gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would...
And also, the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ wiped his hand on the wall and made tayammum. Does that mean you can't return salam if you're on janaba?
No, it just means it's better to be upon Tahârah anytime you mention Allah's name, or make any sort of dhikr, it's better.
But we wouldn't say it was haram though, right? Too?
No, for sure, yeah, because we know there's a hadith where. We know the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ would mention Allah's name in any situation. We know he would sleep on janaba, with just performing wudu. But we know that he would, there's how many ayats that you would recite before bed. So he would be reciting those, obviously not on wudu because he's on janaba. And then just even the lack of evidence. So if someone said, well, you have to be on wudu or not on janaba to make any dhikr, we would say, well, you have to prove that to us because everything is we said that rule that nothing's obligatory until we have evidence to say that it is obligatory. Do you want to keep going or?
Sorry, I just want to clarify on
Yeah.
one. So they say because he feared that he couldn't, in that one hadith you guys just mentioned, he feared he couldn't return the salam in time if he had to get water, so that's why he performed tayammum to return the salam.
Right.
And performing the salah is more worthy. So that's why I say for sure. So if you can't find water within the time, so that's why you perform tayammum, right?
Right, because you don't need to be on wudu to return the salam.
Yeah.
So if he did it for something that was recommended, which means to be on wudu for saying salam is recommended, but it's a condition for salat. Returning the salam is wajib, but making the salat in the time is, it's, how many more times wajib? Like it's something that makes you Muslim or not. Like if you intentionally leave the salat, that type of thing. So they say on many different categories, it's more deserving of being on wudu.